Hello and welcome to another episode of Wise Attraction. I'm so glad that you're able to join us on another Thursday as we continue our love story diaries, studying 5 marriages of the Bible. Today, specifically, we're going to be looking at the marriage of Isaac and Rebecca. What things did they do right? What can we learn from them? What examples can we see from their marriage that we can take and adopt within our marriages? And what things did they do that we can see as signposts of things that we shouldn't do or that we should prevent within our own marriage? So that's what we're going to be looking at today. Thanks once again for joining us. If you haven't subscribed to the Wise Attraction YouTube channel, please take a moment to do so now. Like this video and share with your friends if you feel like they will find it useful. So my name is Dr. Bibi Babs, and I'm your host and the founder of Wise Attraction, which is a resource hub for building strong relationships. So let's just get right into it. If you haven't been joining these 5 marriages of the Bible study, we started with Adam and Eve. We learned a lot from it. I'm not going to go into it, so this video doesn't drag unnecessarily, but it was really eye-opening. If you want to, you can go on the Wise Attraction YouTube channel and you find the video there. We also studied the marriage of Abraham and Sarah, which was also really interesting. We really looked at submission and headship within a marriage. And today we're going to be looking at Isaac and Rebecca. So Isaac and Rebecca, they had an arranged marriage, which was a situation where it was not like they met and they fell in love. It was a situation where Abraham sent his servant to go to Paddan Aram, to go to his father's land, like where his people were, and choose a wife for Isaac. And this was after Sarah had died. So literally Isaac was he was mourning his mother, and his father wanted to bring him out of that period of mourning. And of course he also needed to get married. So he was like, oh, come my servant, go get a wife from Paddan Aram for my child. And so his servant goes, and I've talked about the story of how his servant found Rebecca so many times on this show, so I'm not going to go over it, but he brings Rebecca over to, I think it's Canaan, where Abraham and, I'm not sure it's Canaan, but I think this is where they were, but that's something I need to clarify. So he brings her, and when they get to where Isaac is, the Bible says that Isaac was in the field, he was meditating, and he saw Rebecca, when she asked the servants, oh, who is that? They were like, oh, it's Isaac, is the man you're getting married to. So she covered her face with the veil, and the Bible tells us that Isaac loved her, and Isaac was comforted for the loss of his mom from being with Rebecca, and literally that's how they got married. So today we just want to look more into their marriage. That was the beginning point. I'm going to start by looking at Isaac. One thing that really struck me about Isaac's life is that a lot of the things he did mirrored his father Abraham's life. Not just mirrored his life, even the things that Abraham did when Isaac hadn't been born. Isaac came and he did those things. Like, it's really, really surprising about their story, and things that happened in Abraham's time also happened in Isaac's time. For instance, Isaac had a deep personal relationship with God, and I'm sure he must have learned that from his father, when his father had to sacrifice him. If you haven't read these stories in the book of Genesis, you can go ahead and read in more detail, as I'm unable to go into detail because we have a limited time for this. Anyway, so like Abraham's father, like Isaac's father Abraham, Isaac also lied about his wife Rebecca being his sister. So last week we talked about Abraham and Sarah, how 2 weeks ago, how they went to Egypt because there was famine in the land. They went to Egypt, and while they were there, when they were going there, Abraham told Sarah to lie, saying he's not her husband. And the reason why he said that is because he was scared that they were going to kill him if they find out that he's married to such a beautiful woman. Isaac had the same fear. And remember, when this happened with Abraham, Isaac hadn't even been born. So it's so surprising that again in Isaac's time there was famine. But the difference with Isaac's time is that God actually appeared to Isaac and said to him, don't go to Egypt. to find help. Stay in Gerar, I'll bless you, this is the land I've given you, and all of that. So that's where he went to. But even going there, he was scared that they were going to kill him, and he planned with his wife to lie and say she's his sister. So someone asked a question last week after I did the talk, because I talked about submission and headship, and we used this story. We said that one of the things I said is that Sarah was so submissive that even when her husband asked her to lie, she lied. Now, it's not, I wasn't saying that the lie was right or you need to lie when your husband is there. I'm just saying that she followed her husband to that extent. That's what she did. Doesn't mean that we should lie in our own time. Of course, the Bible is very clear on lying. But someone asked the question and said, if a husband makes a compromising demand from his wife, should she obey in submission? Now, this is really interesting because one of the things that really struck me looking at Isaac and Rebecca, and also Abraham and Sarah's marriage, is that God is also a partner in that marriage. So as a Christian, you've married your partner, but there's also a third partner who is God, that is very much present in that marriage. And we need to interact with him. We need to relate with him like he's really a partner within the marriage, like he's a senior member of the marriage, And my response to this would be, because of course both of you are people of faith, you have a relationship with God. If your husband asks you to do something compromising, I don't think you should just submit and do it. I feel my response to this is go ahead and ask God what to do. If we still look at the story of Abraham, remember that later on, Sarah told him to send his son away. He didn't just send his son away. He went and spoke to God about it, and God said, yes, do what she said, send your son away. So we have a third partner. You're meant to submit to your husband, but you're also meant to submit to God, and your husband is also meant to submit to God. So it's really important to acknowledge the third partner in your marriage. And when such things like this that are complicated and a bit difficult, because you don't want to stir the waters, you just don't want to go ahead and tell your husband, no, I'm not doing this, blah blah blah, just because you want to preserve the peace. You know that you're both on one side, you're one unit. So I'd say the best thing to do is go to God and ask God, what should you do in that situation? It's not every time that a yes no answer is good enough. Sometimes there are other things, because at the end of the day there's a problem. In the case of Abraham and in the case of Isaac, they were scared that they would be killed. They had legitimate fear. They believed that will happen. This is something they believed in their minds. So as a submissive wife, it's not for you to just say, oh no, I'm not doing this. It'll seem like you don't care. But if you go to God, God can give you wisdom as to what to do, to come up with a strategy to address the real problem, to deal with that issue. So that's my response to that. So I'm just going to carry on. So another similar thing that's happened between Isaac and his father Abraham is that his wife, Isaac's wife Rebecca, was also barren, and the Bible tells us that Isaac prayed for his wife to have a baby. And also, so this barrenness was for a season. I think they got married when he was 40. By the time they were 60, Rebecca fell pregnant with their children. So they had twins, Jacob and Esau. So it's really interesting, the ways that Isaac mirrored his father's life. I've heard people speak a lot about individuals repeating what their parents did. Is something that happens a lot, where I watch Focus on the Family a lot, and one of the things they've said is that if you want, this is so interesting, guys, check it out and check your lives if it's true. But they said, if you want to know how the woman that you marry is going to look in 20 years time in her old age, look at her mother. And if you want to know how the man you married is going to look in their old age, look at his father. So what they say in essence is that we tend to mirror the lives of our parents. And if we look at Abraham and Isaac, I don't know if Isaac intentionally chose this, because even if you look at where he lived, even the wells he dug, there are wells that Abraham had dug before. So he really lived the life that his father lived, even doing the things that his father did before he was born. So that's really interesting. Hello, Mrs. Lafunki. Thanks for joining us. I'm just going to read your comments. It's important not to compromise. Whatever the mind of God will be, it will not cause you to sin. God will always bring a way out for you. Yes, this is the thing. God will always bring a way out. So it's always important to go back to God, acknowledge that third partner, and remember the account of Ananias and Sapphira. Yeah, this is something else I mentioned. They both agreed to compromise and their lives were cut short. Yeah, you definitely should not enter into a negative agreement with your partner. It's really important to go back to God and ask him, how can we get out of this? Because a lot of the time when your partner tells you such a thing, there must have been an issue. There's an issue. There's something they're scared of or they're worried about that's making them say that. So you want to deal with the real issue, not the symptom of it. The symptom is the lie. The real issue is fear, and God can bring a strategy to deal with that fear. Okay, so moving on. To the life of Isaac and Rebecca. What is really interesting to me right here is that I believe that one of the things that we can learn looking at Isaac mirroring his father Abraham is that we have the tendency to do the things our parents did. I don't know if you've seen some people will say, oh, there's this thing my father did, I don't ever want to do it, and things like that. And then down the line in your marriage, you then find that you're doing those things and you're like, oh my goodness, this is the thing I said I would not do, I hate it, and things like that. So we need to be intentional. I feel like why we repeat the things our parents did is because they're the examples that we see. We're so close to them and we see various aspects of their lives that when we enter into those situations in the future, the template we have in our head is what they've done. Now, it could be a situation, for instance, Abraham was a great man. He had a beautiful relationship with God. So Isaac had a lot of positive things to learn from his dad. He was very successful. Isaac ended up building his own wealth and success as God blessed him. So we as people that are getting married, we need to be intentional. I'd like to encourage you to think about your parents' marriage. For me personally, I can see so many ways that I'm like my mother. Like sometimes it surprises me. You know, one of the ways you can understand this is even people talk about parenting. You parent how you were parented. Your default setting, all of us, our default setting is to do what our parents did, except we become intentional to reflect on what we've seen growing up and also be intentional to say, okay, I'm going to take this, and do it in my marriage because they are good examples. But these other things, I'm not going to do them because I can do better. You know, the Bible says the glory of the latter shall be greater than the former. So knowing that you can do better, you pick what you're going to continue and refuse and reject what you don't want to carry on within your marriage. So that's something that really caught my eye there. So and also it's so interesting that we treat our spouses the way, or we treat our spouses and we have expectations of them similar to what we saw of our parents. I mean, someone once told me that one of the reasons why he had a lot of arguments with his wife is that he thought that his wife was going to do what his mother was doing. You know, he thought she was going to treat him that way. He thought she was going to take responsibility the way his mom took responsibility. But his wife is a person of her own. She's an individual on her own. And this is the thing we need to be conscious of, because our parents' marriage set expectations and things in our minds that if we're not conscious of and review and choose and decide how to handle situations, it can cause issues within our marriage. Because when you're dealing with your partner, you're not dealing with your father. When you're dealing with your partner, you're not dealing with your mother. You're dealing with a separate individual that you need to understand and know how to relate with. Okay. One area that Isaac fared differently. So Isaac didn't do even if I said that, I've just said that Isaac did a lot of things that his parents did. But of course, we are not bound to do the things that our parents did, because like I said, sometimes we can make different choices because we are different human beings, you know, and if we reflect, we can choose differently. So one of the things that he did differently from his father was communication. And this is one thing that it keeps coming up, you know, when we looked at Adam and Eve, we also talked about communication, open communication that they did not have, that led to the issues that they faced. And even here with Isaac and Rebecca, we are seeing that communication issue repeat itself. So Abraham had open communication with Sarah. We can remember when Sarah felt like Hagar was mistreating her, she went and spoke to Abraham. Even if she was a submissive wife, she had a voice. She spoke to him and she said, God will judge between us concerning this matter that's happening, because she wasn't happy. So she was vocal about it. Also, when she wanted Ishmael out of the house, she went and she told Abraham, I want Ishmael out of the house, you know. But with Rebecca, we see that they were not really communicating. The Bible tells us how Isaac loved her so much. In fact, the way that Abimelech found out that, you know, Isaac had lied to them saying Rebecca is his sister. The way he found out that Rebecca is not his sister is that he found Isaac fondling her. You know, that's how he found out the truth. So in this situation, we can see that Isaac really loved Sarah, but somehow they were not communicating. Isaac prayed for Sarah when she was barren and she had a child. God answered, God gave her the child. But when Rebecca was pregnant and she had issues in her tummy, she went to God. The Bible doesn't tell us that she spoke to Isaac about the issues she was facing. When God revealed to her and said, you're carrying two nations in your womb, one shall fight against the other, the younger shall rule the older, all those type of things, she didn't speak to Isaac about any of it. Rather, she came up with a plan by herself on how to bring God's will to pass, you know, and that plan involved deception. I believe that when God has a plan or whatever, he brings his will to pass, and we don't have to connive or be deceptive to bring that will to pass. So it's so interesting how they didn't spend time talking. You know, when Rebecca was having trouble with her pregnancy, she went to God to find out why. We're not told that she came back and told her husband about it. Parenting is a joint endeavor. Surely this was something that Isaac needed to know. And maybe if he had known, there wouldn't have been a need for her to lead her child, Jacob, into deception. And possibly there wouldn't have been a situation where each of them chose. It seemed like Isaac was chose Esau to be his favorite, and Rebecca chose Jacob to be her favorite. And they didn't make enough effort to build the family together to become one. And this is the issue. When there are communication issues with parents, it affects the children. You know, a lot of the time when we fight for our marriage, when we do things to progress our marriage, to keep the unity, to keep the oneness and the bond, we're not just doing it for ourselves. Fine, you're doing it for yourself, you have a beautiful relationship with your spouse, but you're impacting your children and you're impacting generations to come, because your children will also impact their children. And we're seeing here that the communication gap between Isaac and Rebecca, it led to division with their children, to the point that Jacob deceived Isaac, and Jacob deceived Isaac, yes, and also he cheated Esau, and Esau wanted to kill him. His brother wanted to kill him. Now, imagine if Isaac and Rebecca's marriage was not that way. Imagine if they actually communicated, if they planned together, if they looked at the situation together, if they come up with a strategy together. Will their strategy have been different? Will their children have gotten to this point where they had to deal with unforgiveness, bitterness, and strife? You know, when you're working on your marriage, you're building communication, you're building intimacy, you're building openness. You are also supporting your children. You know, the thing is that it's so interesting how when you have kids, a lot of the time it's almost like the couple, they are not focusing on the children and not focusing on themselves. You feel like, okay, I need to focus on my child, do all of this for my children so that they can do well and they can progress. But also supporting your children and helping them to progress involves ensuring your marriage is successful and fighting for your marriage. When you fight for your marriage, when you build a stable, beautiful, peaceful home, a bonded, united home, you see that your children will thrive. So sometimes it's easy for us to get this the other way around. You feel like, oh, especially for us women, you know, you're the one that gave birth to the child. You have the nurturing responsibility, because there are certain things you can do for your child that your husband can do. And so we focus on our children. I mean, I listen to Pastor Jimmy Evans a lot. He's such a powerful minister. And one of the things he says is that he's heard women say, oh, my children are my life. Oh, my children, I breathe for them. My children is my. And he's wondering, what about your spouse? why is your child taking that place, you know? And we think that we have to do all of these things for our children so that they'll be successful. But when you build your marriage, you build success for your children. So I just want to read, in conclusion, I want to read something that really blessed me when I was reading and preparing for this Isaac and Rebecca's lesson. It was written by Rabbi Shlomo Riskin. Gosh, I'm sure I murdered that name. Rabbi, if you watch this ever in life, please forgive me. Yeah, so he wrote something. Of course, he's Jewish, about the marriage of Rebecca and Isaac. Please stay with me as I read what he wrote, because it's really profound. He said, Rebecca's resorts to ruse. So instead of Rebecca speaking to her husband, instead Rebecca resorts to ruse, casting the otherwise guileless Jacob into a role of deception for which he is unsuited. Not only does he perpetrate a deceit that will haunt him for the rest of his life, but what begins as a split between brothers comes to signify the far greater division between Jews and Gentiles throughout history. So what she did, it's impacted history and generations to come. And this is what I'm saying to you, that when we do things for our marriage, we are impacting generations. It's not just about you and your spouse. Why must Rebecca resort to deception? Why could she not simply have worked this out with Isaac? We must go back to the initial encounter between Isaac and Rebecca, reflecting the gulf that separates them. So here the rabbi is trying to understand why did they have this division between them, that they couldn't speak about something so basic. I'm pregnant, the pregnancy is troubling me. Why didn't they speak about it? Oh, I've gone to God, this is what God said about the children. Why couldn't they speak about something so basic? So the rabbi is going back to sort of explain his own perspective of it. He says, when Rebecca saw, so he says he's going back to when they got married, what happened. When Rebecca saw Isaac, she fell from the camel. She asked the servant Eliezer, what man is this walking in the field to meet us? And the servant responded, it is my master. And she took her veil and covered herself. And he's saying that someone else explains that Rebecca fell because she had never before seen a religious personality, a spiritual persona who communed with nature and actually spoke before God. So awesome was the sight of Isaac transformed by prayer that she was literally knocked off her feet. Compared to the lying and cheating world of her father Bethuel and her brother Laban, Isaac projected a purity with which Rebecca had no previous experience. So Isaac was so spiritual. He was so up there. He was communing with God, So she saw him high and she saw herself low, And there's certain things, we can apply this to our marriages today. There are certain things. What is it that's preventing the communication within your marriage? Is it that you think that your spouse is too good or too righteous or too spiritual that you cannot present some things? Or you as a partner, have you presented yourself to be so high and mighty that your spouse is finding it difficult to speak to you about the basic things just because she feels like both of you might disagree? So one of the things this rabbi brings out is that Rebecca felt like they might have differing opinions about the issue. So this is just one perspective anyway. Rebecca felt like they might have differing opinions about the issue, and that's why she didn't speak up to Isaac about it. He further says, when Eliezer revealed the man's identity, she took the veil and covered herself. So Rebecca covered herself with a veil when she approached Isaac, not only as a sign of modesty, but as an expression of her unworthiness. For from that moment on, the veil between them was never removed. So this whole veil, now when you get married as well, these days we mirror these things. When you're getting married, they say, okay, open the veil and you may kiss the bride. For those that kiss the bride during the service, what this rabbi is saying is that they don't think that veil was ever removed. So there was always something between two of them. And what they're speculating that it is that Isaac was so spiritual that Rebecca couldn't connect with him. And he's saying, and also something interesting, they say that in fact a part of him, so a part of Isaac, oh sorry, I'm just going to go back. She felt she could never speak to her husband as an equal. She never felt that she had the right to offer a dissenting opinion. But why was Isaac unable to bridge the gap? So there are two things now. There's the way she felt that, oh, she's not as good as Isaac or whatever, so because of that I can't speak to him about certain things. But Isaac, on his own part, he could have also made an effort to bridge that communication gap. But what they're saying here is that Isaac never really returned from the experience of where Abraham wanted to almost sacrifice him. Of course, he wasn't sacrificed, but he never really returned from that experience. Part of him, because even the Bible says Abraham returned, but the Bible doesn't tell us what happened to Isaac. If you go, it's in Genesis chapter 22, verse 19. In fact, if you read the book of Genesis chapter 22, you'd understand the experience between Isaac, Abraham, and God on the mountain. And so what they're saying is that experience affected Isaac to the point where he spent a lot of time in the spiritual world, and also, of course, in the physical, because he related his wife also, but part of him was in the spirit world, part of him was in the physical, and it's in the sense that in his relationship with God, praying, meditating, doing all of those things to the point where he was inaccessible. So I guess this also speaks to spiritual leaders and pastors that are married. I mean, I don't really have the right to speak to you guys, but if you're going to look at this story and get anything from there, is yes, build your relationship, your spiritual life, your spiritual work with God, do all of that, but also be present enough that your partner can connect with you. So I'm just going to end with some key lessons from their story, the love story of Rebecca and Isaac. One, reflect on your parents' love life and marriage. If you're watching this, reflect on the love life of your parents and see what can you do differently. Are you mirroring if you're a woman, are you mirroring what your mother did? If you're a man, are you mirroring what your father did? Or are you having expectations of your partner that your parents did, that you expect them to behave that same way? These kind of things can cause issues. So I want you to spend time reflecting and see what you can do differently. Decide what you want to continue and what you want to stop. Continue working on your relationship with your spouse. Be honest with yourself and your spouse. Learn how to disagree lovingly and respectfully. Disagreements are part and parcel of life. Sarah disagreed with Abraham. She voiced it out. Rebecca disagreed with her husband, but she never spoke up. Learn and come up with a way of resolving problems and conflicts. And no matter how spiritually connected you are, take active steps to promote open communication with your spouse. That's it for today. Thanks a lot for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you, Mrs. Lafuki, for always joining and always supporting. Very informative session. Thank you, Dr. Bibi. You are loaded and so passionate about promoting godly relationships. Well done. Thank you, Mrs. Lafunki. I appreciate your joining. And I look forward to seeing all of us next week, Thursday. Have a very beautiful evening. And if you haven't subscribed to the Wise Attraction YouTube channel, please take a moment to do so now. Atisi saying thank you. Thanks, Atisi, for joining. Thanks for always supporting. I really appreciate it. Have a lovely evening, everyone. Bye.